what is air hunger? How does it relate to anxiety? I have never heard of this term until just last night when I met with this expert here in London, Howard Cooper. So, Howard, you specialize in anxiety, overcoming anxiety, and this thing called air hunger.
Right.
All right. First of all, what is it? And then we're going to talk a little bit about how to deal with it, how to overcome it, and how it relates to anxiety.
Right. So it's really interesting that you haven't heard of it. And the reason why is I had never heard of it. And most anxiety sufferers haven't heard of it, yet so many have had it or experienced it, but they don't have a label for it. And what you find is that there's a huge amount of people who have anxiety who get this feeling that they can't take a full, deep, or satiating breath. So it doesn't matter how much they try and breathe in, they feel like they just can't breathe in enough. And it feels like they're suffocating. And guess what happens? When they feel like they're suffocating, they get anxious. And then the more anxious they get about their breathing, the more they overbreathe, which actually is the cause of air hunger. And it just goes round in a loop.
So what comes first? Does the anxiety bring on the feeling of not being able to breathe, or is it the feeling of not being able to breathe that causes them more anxiety? I mean, I'm sure that happens, but which comes first?
Yes, both. Like it could be either way for different people.
So run me down a scenario of like a client you've worked with.
Right. So the reason I became fascinated in this is because when I was 15, I was diagnosed as having a severe panic attack and anxiety disorder.
Okay.
And I was sent to regular therapy, week in, week out. At the end of 3.5 years, I got my therapist's theory as to why I was like I was. The problem was I wasn't any better. But I had weird and wonderful symptoms, one of which was severe air hunger. But I didn't have a label for it. I just thought I was dying. I thought I couldn't breathe. I thought there was something wrong. But I subsequently, years later, I understand what had happened. So for me personally, my sister had been diagnosed with asthma. And having a tendency towards anxiety, my parents, I was worried, what if I got asthma too?
Which brought on more anxiety.
So my parents sent me to the doctor, and the doctor, they thought it'd be really wise, let's do a lung function test for him and check his breathing, because then he'll see he doesn't have asthma and he doesn't have to worry about it. And the doctor did the test, and then they rang back like they do in that very serious tone, and they went, you need to come in and see us. We need to discuss your results. And I went, what? And they said there's a sign of restrictive lung capacity. We've looked at your results. And at the time, this is pre-internet, my mum had this big medical dictionary, encyclopedia. And I went through it, and the only thing I could find that had the words restrictive and lung in it was something called restrictive lung disease. And then underneath it said fatal. And I was like, what?
It's not getting better.
No. So, and they talked restrictive lung disease is like your lungs feel like they don't expand properly because the muscles in between the ribs, they stiffen up. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll reassure myself that I don't have that. Because if I can take lots of big lungfuls of air and essentially overbreathe, but I can really feel that I can take a deep breath in, then I'll reassure myself. And all that happened was between now and seeing the respiratory consultant they'd arranged for me to see in 2 weeks' time, I spent 2 weeks just over breathing to try and relieve myself of the fact that I didn't have a breathing issue, which caused air hunger, and it caused the feeling of suffocation, the over breathing, which was ironic because by the time I saw the respiratory consultant, he took one look at the results and went, I don't know why they've sent you. These results are normal. But by which time I'd spent so long doing anxiety and over breathing, I really felt like I couldn't breathe at all. So then they start running all these extra tests because I'm having real symptoms at this point. And they went, it's just anxiety. And that really annoyed me because it felt so physical. And that's how it feels for many people. They relate to this because they go around, they have all the tests, the medical tests, and everyone just looks at them in the eyes and goes, it's just anxiety. But there is actually a physiological component to it, which occurs when you overbreathe, which is, I think the technical term is either chronic hyperventilation syndrome, or you could talk about it as respiratory alkalosis. But it's to do with the body's response to breathing out too much carbon dioxide, which is acidic. And your body does these balancing actions that the kidneys get involved in. But once that's activated, the worst thing to do is take lots of big, deep breaths.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. And you didn't come up with the term air hunger.
No.
Okay, so how did you come about, or how did you discover this term? And then that
Right.
it was what you were suffering from.
I don't remember where I came across the term. Someone described it as being hungry for air. And they said it was the term air hunger. And this was years later. And I went, oh, that's what I had. And I'd already got over it and kind of figured some stuff out about it. And look, I've got a YouTube channel, and I thought I would put out a video about air hunger, which I didn't think was a smart move originally, because I just thought no one's heard of that, no one's got it, no one's, you know. So I put out this video, and it was by far the biggest.
Yeah, I saw that. It had like
Hits.
50,000 views. So
Right. And the comments, it was like everyone's going, hundreds of people going, that's me. No one's ever described this. No one's ever. So what they have is no one knows what to search for, because they don't really understand it, that they're all having it. And that's why I'm not surprised that people, you know, are going, I don't know what the term is. I haven't come across this thing before. And the worst thing is that every therapist they go to, what do we say to them when they go, I can't really breathe? We go, well, just take some deep breaths. And all it does is make them worse.
So let's say, so is this normally associated with panic attacks or just anxiety in general? How does this, you know, what is, so like say someone is watching right now,
Right.
and they think they might be suffering from this as well.
Right.
So what do you do when you're, I mean, is there things that you would do before this happens to make sure that you can get the air back into your system, or is it there's something they can do while it's happening? How do you go about helping
So
people with this?
there are two things that you like, I think, are really important when treating air hunger. And as far as I'm aware, I'm the only person that's treating both of these things together.
Okay.
Which is you have to look at the physiology behind it. So do what I would call some gentle restrictive breathing exercises, which retrain your body getting used to having a normal amount of carbon dioxide in the system. Essentially, it's a bit like, you know, people who can hold their liquor, right? They have built up a tolerance to alcohol from drinking a lot. I, however, am a Larry lightweight. I cannot hold my liquor, like a tiny
You're
little
British.
bit.
You're supposed to.
I know. I'm just what can I like queuing though, so that's like
Okay,
so
you make up for it.
I make up for it. Yeah, right. But it's a bit like this, that the people who have air hunger, they've become like the Larry lightweights of the carbon dioxide world. Whereas people like who have a normal breathing pattern, they've got very used to holding and tolerating carbon dioxide. So it's about getting people to very gently restrict their breathing, not more deep breathing. It's actually breathing less and
It's
more
very
gently.
counterintuitive.
Well, this is why it's so hard for people to get help, because if you can't breathe, what do you search to look for? You don't
you can
search
breathe,
for,
yeah.
how do I breathe less? You go, how do I breathe more?
Yeah.
But that's kind of the problem. So you have this feeling you can't breathe. And actually, the more you're able to do gentle restrictive breathing exercises, so a really good exercise, and by the way, there's a way of testing out to see
perfect.
whether you have an intolerance to carbon dioxide or, whether you're hypersensitive to it.
Okay.
So we could do it now.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. All right. So here's what we'll do. We'll take a couple of gentle breaths in and out through the nose. Not too big, not too small, just a normal breath. And after you take the normal breath out, you'll pinch your nose and you'll hold your breath. And I'm going to click on a timer. And we time how long before you get a definite sensation that it's time for a breath. So it's not how long can you hold your breath for, it's how long before your body tells you, yeah, it's kind of time to breathe. Okay. So you're about, so I was about 5 seconds getting it out before. So you're about 20 seconds, which is like
Is that
good. It's fine. It's normal.
Okay.
Right?
So and this is probably why I haven't ever experienced air hunger, to my knowledge.
But if I've worked with people who they do that same exercise, and after 2 seconds, they go, because there's carbon dioxide building up in your system the moment you start pinching your nose, and you're not getting the signal, it's time to breathe for 20 seconds. But can you imagine if you got it after 2 seconds?
So just for the people who are watching, if you're trying this exercise, that's not to restrict your breathing. If you feel the need to breathe, make sure you breathe.
Yeah, but please do. Breathing is good. Although, you know, statistically it's bad. Like, well, 100% of people that breathe do end up dying. So, like, it's dangerous. You know, we've got to be careful with breathing.
This is true. This is true.
Right. Yeah. So for me, you have to do the things to change your sensitivity to carbon dioxide. So gentle restrictive breathing exercises. But here's the biggie. there's so much anxiety around the feeling that you can't breathe
Mhm.
that they go into anxiety. So if someone does some exercises to try and overcome this, and after 2-3 days, they're like, I'm not better yet. It hasn't totally got rid of it yet. Oh my God, what if it starts forever? What if I never get better? Oh my God. And they get, what happens with anxiety? Respiration increases. They start to overbreathe. So they get into this horrible pattern where if they're not dealing with the anxiety around it, the overbreathing from the anxious response to not being immediately better undermines the progress they make in doing the exercises, and they
okay.
go back to square one.
Yeah.
But they're even worse now because now they go, but I even tried the breathing exercises and they didn't work.
So about how long would someone expect to see a difference in
Well,
these exercises?
If someone does the right exercises 5-6 times a day, and they might only take a couple of minutes to do, so it's very, very doable, they should see an improvement in their control pause time. That was the test that we did. It might improve 3-4 seconds in a week and keep moving up. But of course, if you start at 3, you'll still be feeling air hunger, even if you've got a control pause time of like 6 or 7 seconds. It will be improved, but it won't be totally gone yet. So it's about how do we help people like hold course.
Okay. So the way I feel about it, anything I'm trying out, I say I give it pretty much everything a standard 30 days.
Right.
If someone did this for 30 days,
Oh,
5 to 6 times a day, they would see a real difference.
They would be feeling a lot better. Yeah.
Okay. So
As
make sure you
long
give
as-
this some time. That, like he's saying, don't
Right.
just do it a few days and say, oh, it doesn't work. Like I've seen people do that a lot.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think the trick is as well with, and this is like true for all anxiety, not just air hunger, but anxiety feels so terrible that people orientate towards, I want to get rid of it. And it's a really dangerous frame to work from. And the joke I always say is, look, I've got 2 kids, right? 10 and 7. And if my son, George, came running into my bedroom one night and said, Daddy, there's a monster under my bed, how effectively would it reassure him if I said, George, there's no monster, but whatever you do, don't look it in the
They've done
eyes.
studies on this. They say,
Right.
Yeah, don't. No, you okay? Sorry, you took a different twist on this.
Don't look it in the eyes. Yeah.
I didn't interrupt. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. But yeah, if I said to him, don't look at there's no monster, but don't look it in the eyes, in telling him he mustn't see it, it would actually imply why not? Is it really there? And I think so many therapists, change workers are not aware of the meta suggestion that they're putting into someone's mind when they start to work within the frame of like, you have to get rid of something.
Right.
Because then why do they have to get rid of it? Because the brain goes, well, it must be dangerous, and the brain wants to keep us safe. So it likes to flag something that it thinks is a threat on the radar, so you pay attention to it more. So the real trick to this is, could you have the unpleasant sensation of I can't breathe without having the threat response from it? And I think one of the things is to become aware that feelings by themselves don't tell us a whole lot. So I sometimes will say to clients, like, what does it tell you if you feel your heart racing?
Well, most of the time we say that I'm under threat. There's a crisis. Something like
And that wouldn't be right.
Right.
The answer is, you know what it tells you? It tells you one thing and one thing only. If you feel your heart racing, it tells you that your heart is racing. That's it.
Because it happens during exercise, and it could happen even when you're feeling a lot of excitement. It doesn't have to be a threat.
Exactly.
Right.
So I say to people, look, like if I saw a beautiful woman in the distance and I feel my heart racing, as humans, we love creating stories. So I'll go, beautiful woman plus heart racing equals attraction, arousal, excitement. But if I go into the kitchen and see a spider run out across the kitchen floor, I don't go and ask the spider out on a date.
Or if a really large man was running toward me,
right,
I wouldn't feel attraction. I would feel like fight or flight.
I'd feel attraction. No, you're right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Or
There's no judgment here. No judgment.
Right. But if I get one flight of stairs and feel it, again, different story. I'm unfit. I need to go to the gym. So, but the feeling doesn't tell me that by itself. So here's what happens. If you have an unpleasant feeling, air hunger or otherwise, is the sensation itself a threat by itself if you strip away the story you're attaching to it?
Right. So making more than one meaning, or allowing there to be, I shouldn't say making, allowing there to be more than one meaning to the heart racing.
Or realizing there's no meaning.
Okay, that's interesting.
Like there's no meaning. There's just heart racing.
Or if you gave yourself the space to stop and say, well, what does this mean? That sudden space that you give it, it said you don't feel it as strongly because it feels like you're almost observing it in yourself, maybe.
That reminds me of something that I think is really key with anxiety, that people think the feeling of anxiety is the answer to the question, is there a threat? So if the question is there a threat, and someone feels anxiety, they go, oh, well, there's the answer. There is
Yeah.
a threat. And I don't think of it that way. I think the feeling of anxiety is the question.
Interesting.
Is there a
Okay.
threat? It's that little moment to go, is there a threat? And that's when you get to engage your cognitive circuits to go, let's take a look. Rather than, is there a threat? Feeling of anxiety says yes. It's more the question.
And so, is this how you work with clients? This is how you treat anxiety?
Yeah, for me, the way I treat anxiety is by helping people see through the illusions of their experience.
Can you give us an example?
Well, so for example, I mean, there's this idea that I'm often asked, like, what is hypnosis? That's because people seem that I do hypnosis. And the way I explain hypnosis is slightly different. I don't believe we have to have whale music on in the background, or get people walking down magic sets of stairs or anything like that. It's really simple. I'll say to people, look, imagine you had have you ever had that experience where someone takes a blackboard and then they take their fingernails
Ooh,
and then
yeah.
they reach now you just went like, oh, and you had like a real response to what? Like, there was no blackboards.
It was your fault. You were putting that in my head.
Right. Your fault. Yeah. But of course, the thing is, there's no sound. There was no blackboard. But for a split second, your brain got so absorbed in the story of blackboard and nails that you had a real response. And for me, that's hypnosis. It's when your body responds to something totally imagined as though it's real. So for me, and the way I work with anxiety, it's like anxiety is the same response. So you have people who go like, I'm terrified of dogs. Okay. I think, but I can't be hypnotized. And I go, right. So like when you think about dogs, what happens? And they go, and I'm like looking around, there's no dogs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm just imagining it's coming towards me and it's barking. I'm like, right, but you can't be hypnotized. And it's literally the mechanism. They're literally creating and getting absorbed in the story of dogs coming towards me and attacking me.
So would you go as far to say that anxiety is a kind of trance?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So
absolutely.
I felt like that's what you were building up to,
Yeah,
but I've
yeah,
never
yeah.
heard anyone say that before.
Well, I think my job is actually not to hypnotize people. It's for me to ruin the illusion or to dehypnotize them or to show them how they've been hypnotizing themselves so they don't fall for it anymore.
Interesting.
It's like, can we ruin the pattern?
Yeah.
It's like spoiling you. Have you ever had that thing where like you're watching a TV show and it's like the end of the big finale and you don't get to see it live and you're like, don't tell me what happens. I don't want, and then someone ruins it for you and you can't go back and unknow it. And that's like kind of what I'm doing. I'm ruining the season finale of their anxiety so they can't go back to how it used to be.
So for the people watching, if they feel that they're suffering from anxiety, how can they find you so that you can ruin their illusion of anxiety?
How can I ruin their mental patterns? Yeah. So I have a YouTube channel, Howard Cooper's Rapid Change Works.
Which is also linked in the description below this.
Perfect. And I've got a website, rapidchange.works, which is more about my one-on-one anxiety work and so on. But I'm really passionate about trying to spread the message, particularly about air hunger and anxiety, because there are so many people who are suffering and like they don't know where to go.
So I learned so much by getting out of my home in California, coming here to London to the UK Hypnosis Conference and convention, and meeting interesting people like yourself. So Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And the way that you help treat anxiety and relieve the suffering for people who are dealing with that. Because I haven't experienced anxiety for a very long time, but I do know the crippling effects of it.
Right.
And it really disables us from being able to live our true potential, live a fulfilling life. And it just doesn't have to be that way. Like there is help out there. We can relieve anxiety and overcome it. So there's no reason to sit there and suffer through it.
Totally agree.
All right. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
doing
Thank
this.
you for having me.
All right.